If a ball is thrown into the air with a velocity of 40 feet per second, its height in feet t seconds later is given by y, which is equal to 40t minus 16t squared. In part A, we want to find the average velocity for the time period beginning when t is equal to 2 and lasting 0.5 second, 0.1 second, 0.05 second, 0.1 second. So the first thing we need to do is we need to recognize what our ordered pair is. We know that we have a first coordinate which represents t, and then the second coordinate is going to be t plus h, where h represents each individual second from 1 to 4. Okay, so we know what t is in our problem. We know that t is equal to 2. So that means that our ordered pair is going to be 2, and then 2 plus h, where h is going to represent each particular second, meaning that's the height in feet in t seconds. Okay, so now that we know what the ordered pair is, we want to be able to find the average velocity. Okay, and so the average velocity is taking y of 2 plus h minus y of 2 divided by 2 plus h minus 2. Okay, now the y that we're referring to is the function that's given. So in step number 3, we're going to figure out what that formula is going to look like for the average velocity. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in 2 plus h as the input into the function. So it's going to be 40 times t, which is 2 plus h, minus 16 times 2 plus h squared. And then that's going to be minus 40 times 2 minus 16 times 2 squared. And then we're going to divide that by 2 plus h minus 2. Now let's go ahead and simplify this a little further. So we have, let's go ahead and square what's inside the bracket. So we have 40 times 2 plus h minus 16 times 4 plus 4h plus h squared. And that's minus 40 times 2 minus 16 times 4. And then if we look at our denominator, we can then eliminate a like term, meaning 2 minus 2 is 0. So what's left is h. And now let's go ahead and distribute what we have in the brackets. So if we distribute the 40, we end up with 80 plus 40h. And then let's distribute the 16. So we get minus 64 minus 64h minus 16h squared. 40 times 2 is 80. And 16 times 4 gives us 64. And again, we're dividing that by h. So if we combine like terms, 80 minus 64 is 16. 40h minus 64h is 24h. And that's minus 16h squared. Minus 80 minus 64 is 16 all over h. So now we can combine like terms. So what we end up with is 16 minus 24h minus 16h squared minus 16 over h. And so we know that the 16s equal 0. And so in our numerator, we can factor out an h, and what's left is negative 24 minus 16h, and then divide that by h. And so therefore we end up with negative 24 minus 16h. And therefore this is the average velocity. So now this is our average velocity, and we're going to let h equal each one of these to determine what our average velocity is going to be. So our first one, h, is going to be 0.5 seconds. So when h is equal to 0.5 seconds, we want to find the average velocity. So that's negative 24 minus 16 times 0.5. And therefore, that is going to give us negative 32 feet per second. Okay, now we want to find out what is the average velocity when it is 0.1 second. Again, let me remove that s there. So again, we want to find the average velocity. And so now this is going to be negative 24 minus 16 times 0.1. So the average velocity at 0.1 second is negative 25.6 feet per second. Okay, and then the other seconds are 0.05 and 0.01. So when h is equal to 0.05 second, again we want to find the average velocity. So that's negative 24 minus 16 times 0.05. So the average velocity there is negative 24.8 feet per second. And then when h is equal to 0.01 second, again, to find the average velocity is negative 24 minus 16 times 0.01. So the average velocity there is negative 24.16 feet per second. So now it's asking us to estimate the instantaneous velocity for when t is equal to 2. Well, we can see here it's getting closer and closer to negative 24 feet per second. So the instantaneous velocity when t is equal to 2, when h approaches 0, because 0.5, 0.1 is getting closer to 0, 0.05 is getting even closer to 0, 0.01 is getting even closer to 0. So the closer it gets to 0, then we can see that the average velocity is at negative 24 feet per second.